Welcome back to Wittenberg Academy's Greek 1 course. Our book is Gleason's Greek Primer, and we are ready for Lesson 5, the imperfect indicative active with an augment. In the secondary tenses of the indicative, the verb receives at the beginning an augment or increase, the sign of past time. This augment has two kinds. The syllabic augment. The imperfect and aorist indicative of verbs beginning with a consonant prefix the syllable e, as in eluon, the imperfect of luo, I was loosing. This is called the syllabic augment or the epsilon augment. Now the imperfect tense is continuous action in the past time. So I was eating, or I kept on eating, or I used to eat. The idea is that it happens in the past time, but that it has an ongoing action to it. Whereas the aorist is something in the past time that tends to view the event as a whole. So I ate breakfast, as opposed to I was eating. I was eating would be imperfect. I ate would be aorist. And 75, the temporal augment. The imperfect and aorist indicative of verbs beginning with a vowel or a diphthong lengthen the first vowel. As in ago, the imperfect becomes agon, I was leading. A and e become eta. Iota, omicron, upsilon become long iota, omega, and long upsilon. I or alpha iota subscript become eta iota subscript. And omicron iota becomes omega iota subscript. This is called the temporal augment. Well, you can think about it in one of two ways. It's easier, I think, just to think about that epsilon plus a vowel makes the vowel long. So you see, so in ago, you can think of that epsilon plus that alpha makes an eta. That epsilon augment simply makes the vowel long. That they come together to make a long vowel. Very well. Let's look at our paradigms. For luo, we get aluon, alues, alua, aluamen, aluata, aluon. So to form the imperfect, it's the augment plus the stem plus the ending. And the ending is on, s, e, amen, eta, on. So notice the first person singular and the third person plural look the same. Okay, it's common, of course, across English verbs. I learn, you learn, he learns, we learn, y'all learn, they learn. They only have two different forms for all the different persons and numbers. So on, s, e, amen, eta, on. And then with ago, that the epsilon makes the alpha long, so agon. But the endings are the same. On, s, e, amen, eta, on. And then grapho. On, s, e, amen, eta, on. So as you can see, those, let me find my right page, those endings are no surprise. Where did our aorist go? Did we just learn the aorist? Well, at any rate, the strong aorist endings, of course, is what those should remind you of. Well, at any rate, the imperfect indicative active, remember, is past time, ongoing action. And I would make a card both of the whole thing for luo, and then eluon, elus, elua, and so forth. And then I would make one with just the endings. To remember your endings and the formula for creating the imperfect. The augment plus the stem plus this set of endings that you are to learn here. Okay. Continuing on page 25, the imperfect is formed from the present stem, obviously. Compare the endings to the imperfect with those of the present. Note the effect upon the accent of the temporal augment. Yes. You'll remember that if your verb ending is short, the verb ending is recessive. If the last syllable in a verb is short, That accent wants to go backward 3 spots to become an acute accent on the third last syllable. If it can't go back all the way, if there aren't enough syllables, then it will become a circumflex accent on the farthest back syllable it can go. And so here you see agon. Well, it wants to go back 3 spots, but there aren't 3 syllables. There are only 2. So that acute accent becomes a circumflex accent. So you can just remember that. If in a verb accent, the acute accent can't go back 3 spots because there aren't enough syllables, it will become a circumflex accent on the penultimate, on the second last syllable. Write the imperfect indicative of harpazo, paio, and pempo. A fine exercise if you would like to do that for some practice. Always a good idea. On page 26, we have some vocabulary. Angelos. Angelos is a messenger. Obviously where we get the word angel in English means a messenger. Adelphos. Adelphos is a brother. And again, both of those are masculine. So you could write them down on your card. Ha Adelphos. Excuse me. Ha Adelphos. Ha Angelos. Ha Theos is God. Ta Padion. Ta Padion is a child. Ta Ploion is a boat. Ta Ploion. Dikaios. Dikaion is an adjective. It means just or right. Penta. Penta, that it means indeclinable. That means it doesn't have cases. So 5, whether it's talking about something in the nominative, the accusative, the genitive, it'll always be spelled penta. It's indeclinable. Tis is pronoun, masculine or feminine, means who. T is the neuter, it means what. Epi, preposition with the genitive, it means on. With the dative, it means upon or by. And with the accusative, it means to or against. So that changes meaning depending on the case that follows it. So you'll want to note that on your vocabulary card. That epi plus the genitive is on, plus the dative is on or by, plus the accusative is to or against. Okay. So we've got vocabulary, and you've got a new tense form to practice and to learn. And when you're ready to try the sentences, remember, pause the tape at this point, do your very best to write out a good translation, and then come back and check your work. Sentence 1. Hoi ton theon lagoi esan saphoi. Hoi ton theon lagoi esan saphoi. Here again we have, well, first we look for the verb. Where's the verb? Esan. We learned that as a vocabulary word. It's the imperfect of the verb to be. They were. What were? Anything in the nominative? Yes. Hoi lagoi and saphoi. The words were wise. Now how does everything else go together with that? Ton theon. Genitive plural. So we translate it with of the gods. The words of the gods were wise. Number 2. Tois theois ethuan. Hoi dikaioi anthropoi into chorio. Tois theois ethuan hoi dikaioi anthropoi into chorio. Where is the verb? Ethuan. Parse the verb. What tense is it? Imperfect. What number is it? Plural. Third person plural. Right? And we know it's indicative active because that's all we're working with right now. So present indicative active, third person plural, from the verb thuo, to sacrifice. So they were sacrificing. What were sacrificing? Something in the nominative. Hoi dikaioi anthropoi. The righteous men. The righteous men were sacrificing. Now we need to fit everything else into that. The righteous men were sacrificing tois theois. Dative. To the gods. Dative we often translate with to. The righteous men were sacrificing to the gods in Tochoriu, in the place, in the spot, in the region. Number 3. Tiskar ega ta padia epiton pataman. Tiskar ega ta padia epiton pataman. It's a question mark. That semicolon is a question mark. Where's the verb? Ega. Parse it. Imperfect, indicative active, third person singular, from the verb ago. So that's, you parse something. You've got imperfect, that's the tense. Indicative, that's the mood. Active, that's the voice. First, that's the person. Or here, third, sorry, that's the person. Singular, that's the number. And what's the verb? And then, the dictionary form of the verb is ago. So, he, she, or it was leading. Is there something in the nominative that goes with it? Yes. Tis is nominative singular. Who was leading? How does everything else fit together with that? Well, gar just means for. For who was leading, ta paidia, that's accusative plural. That's your object, direct object. Who was leading the children, epi tan patamon, toward the river? Who was leading the children to the river? Sentence 4. Kai penta du loi efoigan, eis ta padian. Kai penta du loi efoigan, eis ta padian. Where's the verb? Efoigan, efugan, however you want to pronounce that epsilon, upsilon. Efoigan. They were fleeing, right? Third person, plural. Imperfect, indicative, active. Of course, it could be first person, singular. They have the same ending. They have the same form. But here I see there's a nominative, douloi, that's plural. So I know this is third person plural. Kai penta, and 5 slaves were fleeing eis ta pedion, toward or into the plain. 5. Hadahuias tu angelu eminen into ployo. Hadahuias tu angelu eminen into ployo. Where's the verb? Eminen. Third person singular, and it is imperfect indicative active. He, she, or it was remaining. Now, why does it have that n ending instead of the a ending? Well, remember on those, on many of those endings that are just a short vowel, if they come before a noun, or excuse me, before a word that begins with a vowel, it'll add that movable nu, that nu that is just there so that there's not hiatus. That's 2 vowels in a row. So you don't want to say emina n, you want to say eminen n. Just like you don't want to say apple, you want to say an apple. Same thing in English. We have movable nu in English as well. Well, so it's he, she, or it was remaining. Who was remaining? What's in the nominative? Ha huias, the son. The dad just means but the son, tu angelu, that is genitive. How do you translate the genitive? With of. But the son of the angel was remaining in to ployo, on the boat. 6. Epigar to patamo eche ployan kalan, doran tu adofu. Epigar to patamo eche ployan kalan, doran tu adofu. Where is the verb? Eche. Parse it? Present, indicative, active, third person singular from the verb echo. So he, she, or it has. Anything in the nominative to go with it? No, just standing on its own. He, she, or it is. So we start at the beginning. For, gar, for epi. Now what does epi mean with the dative? Because it's followed by the dative. Epi to. With the dative it means on or by. For upon the river, eche, he has ployon kalan, a beautiful boat. Doran tu adofu, a gift of the brother, of his brother. Genitive. So we translate tu adofu with of, because it's genitive. Sentence 7. Tista epimpa tus hippus. Tista epimpa tus hippus. Verb epimpa, that's third person singular, imperfect indicative active, he, she, or it was sending. Anything in the nominative? Yes, tis. But who was sending the horses? But who was sending the horses? Tiaxe haangelas. Tiaxe haangelas. Tiaxe, Pars oxe, future indicative active, third person singular. He, she, or it will drive or lead. T oxe haangelos. Haangelos is in the nominative, so it's the messenger will lead or drive. What will the messenger lead or drive? And 8, ta paidion elepa ta himation into hiero. Ta paidion elepa ta himation into hiero. The child, elepa. The child is in the nominative. Elepa is third person singular, imperfect indicative active. The child was leaving, or used to leave, tahamation, the cloak, in the temple. Into hiero. So tahamation is accusative, it's your direct object, in the temple. And again, the imperfect can often be used where we in English would use the idiom, used to. Or it can even be the beginning of an action. The child began to leave the garment, the cloak, in the temple. But for the sake of simplicity, always start your translation of the imperfect with the past progressive in English. Was doing. So the child was leaving his cloak in the temple. And now just some verbs. Abalaman, parse that. Imperfect indicative active, first person plural. We were throwing. Apayata, parse it. Imperfect indicative active, second person plural. Y'all were striking. Kaleoses, future indicative active, second person singular. You will command. And herpadzon is first person singular or third person plural, imperfect indicative active. I was snatching or they were snatching. Let's talk about how you would write these in Greek if you wanted to practice this. He will not sacrifice to the wise God. Again, start with the verb. He will not sacrifice. What tense does that have to be? Future. Well, how do you make the future of the verb sacrifice, which is thuo? You add a sigma to the stem, and then you add the normal present ending. So thuse. But you want it to be not, so you're going to say thuse, he will not sacrifice to the wise God. What case does theos need to be in? It needs to be in the dative, to something. So, thuse, to, sapho, theo, to the wise God. For he wrote just words. Again, start with the verb. So your verb is going to be grapho. If you want this to be imperfect, you would say egrapha, tous, saphus, lagus. They need to be in the accusative. They're the object. And in the plain were 5 rivers. We learned our verb for were was ason. Ason penta patamoi. Ason penta patamoi. There were 5 rivers in to pedio, in the plain. Dative, because in takes the dative. Very good. And a little dialogue. Thomas kai hamatetes. Thomas and the disciple, the schoolboy, the learner. Alanun, o adelpha, ti temran emethes into deleo, Alanun, o adelpha, ti temran emethes into didaskaleo. Well now, or but now, O adelpha, my brother, what today did you learn in the school? Pala de amathan tomasidion, malista data elenica onomata. Many things did I learn, Tommy, especially Greek nouns. Tada elenica kalapaston, but isn't Greek hard? Data emoiga dake raona e helatine. Oh, not at all. To me, it seems easier than Latin. Colontuta. Oh, that's great. That's fine. Tengar Latine nemiso, for I hate Latin. Nunda iom in paidzomenoi. Now let's go play. Udeta tagar epitheta upomamatheca. No, indeed. For the adjectives I have not yet learned. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Oh dear. And there's a picture of Thomas Sidion playing. Padze, playing. Well, that does it for Lesson 5. So you have much to learn in Lesson 5. A new tense. Of course, some vocabulary as well. You want to review what's been going on in the other chapters beforehand so that you can learn those as well and be ready for another quiz, because remember, all of our quizzes are cumulative. Anything that you've learned in chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 can also be on this lesson for Lesson 5. So take your time this week, really practice all this so that you'll be ready for the quiz.